everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm bringing you my part 3 of my 12 Friends 12 books. Today I'm going to be reviewing 2 books. One is a novella, To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers, and the other one is A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. So I'm going to start with To Be Taught If Fortunate because I'm going to work chronologically in my reading month. To Be Taught If Fortunate was the novella recommendation from Green Tea and Paperbacks, and I was really excited. I made a few mistakes. So in the past, I said that To Be Taught If Fortunate was included in the Wayfarer series. It is not. I've been corrected. This is kind of like a separate standalone novella thing by Becky Chambers, and I ended up really, really loving it. So I didn't realize really until I started reading it, and also until Laura said that it wasn't in the Wayfarer series, that it wasn't, and I also listened to it on audiobook, so I actually even haven't read like my copy of it at all. But basically, it's this like totally fantastic kind of, it's set sort of as letters almost. I'm trying to find what it looks like. But it's written very much like it's letters, basically as if it would be, you know, like doing progress reports if you were in space, which, I mean, I don't know what that would be like because I'm here as a book blogger, not as an astronaut. But anyway, that's kind of how it's written. And what I ended up loving about To Be Taught If Fortunate is that it felt so expansive. Like, even though it's a novella, you can see how thin it is. When I think about the world, and when I think about the characters, and when I think about the plot, like, all of it just feels stretched out. There's this quality of Becky Chambers writing where it just feels so expansive and rich, and I feel like immediately I was hooked by this narrative voice, like, oh, essentially the first line is, if you read this, right? And so I just immediately was totally hooked by just that plea, but also that, like, you're writing a letter almost as if you're writing to someone else. And it was always like, there was also this subtle tension within To Be Taught If Fortunate, because I was like, oh my god, is something gonna happen? Like, what is gonna happen? Because you can get a sense from the reading, and that's what I love about this lens, right? You can get a sense from the reading that something has happened that's kind of impacted how they're narrating these events to you, but you don't know what has happened. So for example, when I first started reading To Be Taught If Fortunate, I was like, wait, is the narrator like the only one left? Are they like stranded? What is going on, right? Like all of these different possibilities. And that's what I love about this lens of writing and the lens of reading, is because there's this immediate kind of tension, like, oof, I don't know what's going on, as in like I don't know what has prompted this. So the whole time I was reading or listening to this book, I was kind of like waiting for that other shoe to drop moment, essentially. And when things become more clear, it is so fantastic. And also To Be Taught If Fortunate was one of those things where like it hooked me, and then the plot of like exploring other planets and having kind of those adventures in the middle, that plot kept me hooked. And at the end, what ended up like solidifying this as a 5-star rating for me was just that it ends talking about the purpose of space travel and like what humans are trying to get when they are exposed to new worlds. Like, what is the purpose to humanity? Why should humanity care about space travel? Why should we care about discovering new worlds, about conducting research? Like, why should we care, essentially? And that's kind of delved into at the end of To Be Taught If Fortunate. And so overall, it was such a total win. It kind of solidifies my love for Becky Chambers books in general. I've loved the Wayfarer series. I have not read The Galaxy and the Ground Within yet. It's going to be like my read tomorrow, essentially. But this is kind of why I really love To Be Taught If Fortunate, and I knew I was gonna love it, basically. And then I did love it, because I remember every Wayfarer's book I read, which, you know, not the same series, but every Wayfarer's book I read, Becky Chambers is able to kind of give you a different feeling in each of the books. I felt like in every book that I've read in that Wayfarer series, each of them gave me something that I didn't know I was looking for, but also a different feeling. And I don't really know how to describe it, and you should just read the Wayfarer's book. But that's kind of the best way I can describe it, and this is the same with To Be Totally Fortunate. Like, the hook of it being so different ended up kind of circling back to why I'm so consistently happy, surprised, shocked, like all those words with Becky Chambers' stories, and that's why. So I cannot recommend this enough. Thank you, thank you. And the next book that I want to talk about is A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. I should make sure that this is actually what it's called. I've definitely called it a variety of different names. I was thinking that The Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe and the Wayfarer series, so A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, like all of these titles, please just make it easier for me to remember. Yes, A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. This is a recommendation from Delara, so from Book With No Name on Instagram. I'll leave everyone's links obviously down below. This review is going to be really hard for me because I really wanted to absolutely like 5-star love A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe because Delara really, really loves it. So I just feel like at the beginning, I didn't know that it was going to be a mix between magic and sci-fi. So I thought it was just going to be all sci-fi, spaceships, you know, whatever. And then it ended up being a mixture of magic and sci-fi, which I had conflicting feelings upon with it throughout the book. So at first, I was really surprised and also like, oh, what's gonna happen? And then during the middle, I was like, oh, I really like this. And at the end, I still really liked the world building, but in general, I just have a lot of questions about it. And I know that this is the beginning of a series, so maybe the world building, or specifically I want to talk about the connection between magic and sci-fi. I hope that maybe that would be more explicitly explained to me. Like, I guess I'm just a little bit confused about how it works. And I guess A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe is very much, at least for the world building, like this is how it works, roll with it. And I definitely appreciate that because I think a lot of the world building or a lot of sci-fi/fantasy books can have the tendency sometimes to do a lot of info dumping. So I definitely think that there's something to be said for kind of rolling with the punches and, you know, keeping going with the world. So ultimately, that didn't like impact my reading so much. Just in general, I liked the concept of the world building. But I just have some questions about how it works essentially. But I liked the idea of mixing science and magic definitely together. And so I would be interested to see how that kind of evolves or develops within the future. For me, the reason why I didn't connect with A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe as much as I wanted to was that it's mostly dual POV. And I just didn't like one of the POVs as much as the other. So basically, the two POVs is I don't know how you pronounce any of the names, basically, because I didn't listen to it on audiobook. But I really liked Nyla's point of view. And I was having a harder time with Boots' POV, so point of view. So Nyla is this racer, or I don't know, ex-racer, like basically racer character, which I loved the concept of racing in science fiction or like in general. I love the concept. And so Nyla is this character who loves racing and is kind of thrown headfirst into this conspiracy thing that, you know, never really, it's one of those things where like you're focused always on what you're wanting to do, and so you maybe don't necessarily see all of the stuff around you. Nyla is thrown headfirst into the bulk of the action of A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe, which is this conspiracy, magic, betrayal, like a bunch of different things that ends up factoring into these larger world history, I guess, which, to be honest, was very confusing for me at the beginning because I didn't really understand what was happening. It was one of those things where, like, all the characters kind of know with varying degrees what happened, but no one is explicitly being like, this is what happened. So I guess in terms of my feelings about A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe, I liked a lot of the things that were in the book. I just needed a little bit more explanation to really understand, because a lot of the times I felt really confused. So I don't want to do any spoilers, so I won't do any spoilers, but a lot of the times I'm really confused about these larger kind of histories between different planets and also war, you know, like, I mean, all of those kinds of big plot events. I was kind of confused about what happened, and only at the end I was actually buddy reading this with Kate, so only at the end I was like, oh my god, wait, I finally get it. And then I asked Kate all these questions throughout reading, and I was like, you know, is this happening? What is happening with this? What about this? And we were both kind of struggling to figure that out. And so only at the end did everything click for me. And I understand a part of why it clicked is that a lot of things are revealed which you wouldn't know at the beginning. But in general, a lot of the things that were revealed also made me more aware of like the history of the world in general. So I guess that was confusing for me, and it made reading it like interesting, but also I was lacking that like, oh my god, I need to keep reading, because in general I was a little bit confused. At the beginning I had different feelings. At the beginning I was kind of like, no, Nyla's super privileged, this is going to be a real rough ride, right? And then Nyla ended up totally just sweeping me off my feet, and I ended up really enjoying Nyla's perspective. And I think why I did is because Nyla has a lot of the same questions that we do as readers. Nyla doesn't really understand necessarily all of the ramifications of these historical events, even not necessarily sure what happened, right? Nyla is thrown headfirst into this old crew, essentially, of Boots' old crew / all of those relationships that are already established and all of their history. Like, Nyla's thrown as a newcomer into these situations, and so it's very easy, or it's very easy for me to connect with that perspective, because that's kind of this perspective we have, right? We are thrown, as well as Nyla, into this head-first kind of mixture of these new ways of doing things and like battles and stuff like what Nyla is not at all experienced with. I had a really hard time sometimes with Boots' perspective, because Boots has a lot of things going on, right? Boots has all of these previous relationships with the people on the ship. Not everyone, but you know, with most people, Boots kind of knows about them. Boots has also an ex-military kind of background, and so Boots is just very, very different from, you know, the average reader perspective, and a lot of all of these different things connected to the war and connected to the military and connected to these broader historical world events. So the thing is that from a character who knows more about the world and knows more about the people and the mixture of magic and fighting and like sci-fi and, you know, technology and spaceships, right? We don't get a lot of information from Boots, because I think in general Boots is a character that doesn't share a lot, and I think that over time we get to know Boots a lot better, and we get to see more of Boots' kind of soft spots and more of Boots' trauma and vulnerabilities, and kind of, you know, there were a few moments where I felt really very deeply for Boots, but in general I liked Nyla's perspective just so much better, and it was so much easier for me to understand. And so as a character, when I think about characters, I think that it was just harder for me to get to know Boots and for me to kind of figure out what Boots was about. And so, I don't know, for those reasons, it wasn't that I like hated A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe, but for me, I just needed a little bit more in certain aspects for me to really like obsessively love it, and also for me to be like pulled through it, right? So I felt very connected to Nyla's perspective, which meant that I was pulled through the bits of the book that I read from Nyla. And also Nyla has a really great relationship that I really loved, that I wanted to see kind of how that developed. So that kind of brings up all of my feelings about A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. If you would ask me if I would continue the series, I am open to continuing the rest of the series just because I'm interested, based on the ending, to kind of see what goes on. And I think also the revelations that happened in the last quarter of the book, those are interesting to me for setting up future books and for kind of figuring out, actually I have a lot of questions about all of those revelations, but it is interesting for me, or I can think of how it would be interesting for me to kind of figure out where it's going. And also I guess what I will have to do is read the Goodreads synopsis first of maybe book 2 to figure it out. But I hope that now that I'm kind of sort of slowly getting a handle more on Boots' character, I know I already like Nyla's character, so hoping that I understand a little bit more, and I haven't read the synopsis of the second one at all, so I can't like say at all if even those characters or any of the characters I knew were in it, right? That's certainly not how it worked for some of the Becky Chambers books, but all I can say is that I'm interested, or I'm intrigued. I'm open to potentially reading more from this series, just I'm definitely gonna need a break. And as I said, read the synopsis for book 2 before I even think about it. But anyway, that's the end of my part 3 of the 12 Friends, 12 books. In general, I'm halfway through, and it's not the end of March yet. You will see this in not March because I'm so behind on videos, but halfway through, not halfway through the year, I'm feeling pretty good. I still have my graphic novel from CW that I still have to read. I'm feeling really good, actually, on my 12 Friends, 12 books things. Like, being halfway through and not halfway through the year, I like feel a little bit more like I can calm down and maybe go back to the one a month, which is probably what it was intended to do. So anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed coming along on this ride and are looking forward to part 4, where I talk about, you know, 2 books I haven't read yet. So I can't really tell you exactly which ones they'll be. I'll leave all the links for everyone and the books and all my links in the description down below. Please also let me know, especially if you've read A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe, how you feel, or if you've read Becky Chambers' books, over here, how you feel. I love both of those. I love that both of these also were sci-fi. This randomly ended up working out so well. And yeah, I will see you next one. Bye!